In October 1962, James Bond first hits cinema screens. The world has not been the same ever since. Meet James Bond, Secret Agent 007, licensed to kill when he chooses, where he chooses, whom he chooses. His choice of drink, world famous.
Medium dry martini, lemon peel, shaken, not stirred.
His tastes, impeccable.
Where were you measured for this fight?
My tailor, Savile Row.
His introduction, timeless.
Bond. James Bond.
The success, legendary. But how does one create a legend? Welcome to the inside story of the first James Bond film adventure.
Cousin Nancy is married to her then husband, Simon Wolf. And he said, "Have you ever read this book by Ian Fleming?" I said, "No." He said, "Make a great movie."
David Picker agrees that Agent 007 has all the right ingredients.
I actually had a conversation at lunch one day with Lou Wasserman, who at the time was representing Alfred Hitchcock. And I said to Lou, "I got a great idea for Mr. Hitchcock, James Bond." He says, "Oh, well, we represent Mr. Bond through our London office." He said, "You can't get the rights."
Meanwhile, Cubby Broccoli splits with his longtime associate Irving Allen and begins searching for new projects.
Cubby hired Wolf Mankiewicz to do a script, which I think was based on the Arabian Nights. And it wasn't going very well, and Cubby decided that he wouldn't go through with it. He wasn't going to do it. So Wolf said, "Well, what is it you really want to do, Cubby?" And he said, "You know what I want to do. I want to do the James Bond books." He said, "Well, I know the fellow who has the option. Would you like me to bring him in?"
A meeting is scheduled for the next morning. And for Harry Saltzman, the meeting could not come quickly enough.
It was a real ticking clock. He was very, very worried. He always told me that he had this option. It was running out. He had no deal for distribution, no deal for production, didn't have the money.
At first, Cubby wants to buy Harry Saltzman's option, but Saltzman has other ideas.
Harry didn't want to sell the option. He wanted to become a partner. So that's how that partnership started.
Bud Ornstein ran our London office, and he called and said that Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli wanted to come to New York and meet with us about something.
They met with Arthur Krim, Bob Benjamin, and David Picker. And David had known the books, and he was very excited about the project.
The two of them came in the office and said, "We have the rights to James Bond." And I was sitting back in my chair like this, and they came forward like that.
The entire thing only took an hour.
They never left that office until we had a deal.
And they shook hands, and the deal was done.
In those years, when you made a deal with somebody, you would finance a movie, distribute the movie, pay the bank losses, pay the profits if there were any, without a signed piece of paper. At least at United Artists you would, because our word was all that was required.
They were giants in their industry.
Harry Saltzman and Cubby Broccoli understood the Bond books. They understood the kind of films we hoped that they would make, and they made them.
Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman form two companies. First, they create a Swiss corporation which will actually hold the film rights.
Well, my first name is Dana, D-A-N-A, and Harry's wife's first name was Jackie, J-A-Q-U-I.
Eon Productions will actually produce the films. For many years, some speculate that the name stands for everything or nothing.
Cubby was always, when I said to him, "Does it mean everything or nothing?" he'd say, "Never heard of that."
The easiest one to do from the point of view of style and below-the-line content was Dr. No. And that's why I pushed forward.
I have to say, I do admire, especially David Picker. David Picker, United Artists, was the man who pushed this picture through.
Broccoli and Saltzman asked the man who brought them together, Wolf Mankiewicz, to work with Richard Maybaum on the treatment for Dr. No.
I know that the script was not up to requirements.
Broccoli and Saltzman insist that the script adhere more closely to Ian Fleming's novel. Eventually, Wolf Mankiewicz drops out of the project and, fearing the film will be a disaster, asks to have his name removed from the script. In hiring a director, Broccoli and Saltzman limit their choices to British filmmakers who have a strong sense of personal style. The job is offered to Guy Green, Guy Hamilton, and Ken Hughes. All turn the job down. Finally, they hire director Terence Young, It proves to be an inspired choice.
Cubby knew that he would bring a lot of style to the film, which he did.
I mean, Terence was the director that set the sort of style of it.
Terence was a filmmaker. He had a good eye.
And he saw himself as James Bond.
Terence Young was James Bond. He was the glamour.
Terence Young works closely with the producers, and with Richard Maybaum he makes a key stylistic decision. He will take the elegance, wit and sophistication of Ian Fleming's writing and infuse the character of James Bond with those qualities.
You know, every director puts his stamp on a film. Every director, some of his personality, if sometimes not all of his personality, comes off in a film.
His main influence was creating the Bond character.
The search begins for an actor to play the role of James Bond.
They looked at a lot of actors.
Terence wanted Richard Johnson to play the part. Well, there were a lot of people considered, including Cary Grant, who was our best man at our wedding. But Cubby knew that if he asked Cary to do it, it would be a one-film deal, and then he'd have to start all over again, searching for Bond.
We originally planned to use Roger Moore when we made Dr. No, but he wasn't available. He was working on television.
I was working on a film called On the Fiddle. The producer of that was a very fine man, Ben Fish. And Ben Fish was a friend of Harry Saltzman. And it was Ben Fish who suggested that maybe Sean would make a good James Bond.
On the other side of the globe, Cubby Broccoli remembers Connery from an introduction made by Lana Turner. He asked to see Connery's latest film.
One afternoon in California, he called me from Goldwyn Studios, and he said, "I'd like you to come down right away. I want you to see an actor." And the film was Darby O'Gill and the Little People, and the actor was Sean Connery. So at the end of it, he said, "What do you think of him?" And I said, "I think he's fantastic."
Some at United Artists are unconvinced at first. The producers meet Connery in London and become more certain of their choice.
I like the way he moved, and the fact that he had a lot of acting experience. But he moves extremely well.
United Artists is finally convinced to go with an unknown. It is a decision they will not regret.
I think I might have heard the expression, he was the richest man in the poorhouse at the time. The best choice of a group that nobody was jumping up and down about, but he seemed just fine. He looked great.
Immediately, Terence Young and Connery work on creating the appropriate style for James Bond.
You have to remember that Sean was a pretty rough diamond at that time. And Terence taught him everything he knew.
I think he really sort of coached Sean how to be James Bond. He had a maximum amount of style.
He had an enormous influence on creating James Bond in the person of Sean.
This real style and the movement of the piece was Terence Young stamped all over it. If you asked what were the three ingredients for Dr. No, for James Bond, it was Sean Connery, Sean Connery, and Sean Connery.
There was a very high-level meeting. We discussed at great length the character of Bond, the type of things he would have, whether he would have cufflinks, a tie pin, an identity chain, what watch he was wearing, what sort of wallet he would carry. In those days, it was not the gas lighter, it was the old petrol lighter.
Terence really took me in hand and sort of knocked me into shape with his tailor and Turnbull and Asser shirts and all the gear.
The only gimmick, if I may call it such, is the one where he carries his gun, and the whole art of the thing is to cut the suit in such a way so it's just that little bit fuller so that it follows the contour of the figure.
007 suits must take quite a lot of wear and tear, yet still look good.
You've got to put guts into that so that whatever you do to the suit, if you can do that, you see what I'm doing now. Any well-made suit, you should be able to take it, roll it into a ball, crush it, stamp on it, sleep in it, and then there you are, you're back again, you see.
Connery's dress shirts are made by Turnbull and Asser.
Terence Young brought a young Sean Connery into Turnbull and Asser, introduced him to the shop and the fitters here. What we did for Bond was design a very stylish sartorial shirt with a double cuff, but instead of using a cuff link to fasten the cuff, we put 2 buttons on the cuff. This made it easy for Bond to put the shirt on and also easy for Bond to take the shirt off.
To get a feel for the finely tailored clothes, Terence Young reportedly asked Connery to sleep in his new suit. Connery obliges and is amazed when the suit feels just as comfortable when he awakens after a full night's rest.
Concept was always take what Fleming had created and let's put it on the screen.
For the filmmaker, this means taking the production to Jamaica. The filmmakers ask Ian Fleming to help find someone in Jamaica to help scout locations.
Ian recommended me to be the kind of local guy. They wanted to scout locations, so I took them all around scouting locations, and we all got on very well. They became very close friends.
Blackwell helps the crew find some of the most exotic spots in Jamaica. Meanwhile, the filmmakers fill out the cast in London. For the role of the half-Chinese, half-German Dr. No, Ian Fleming suggests his close friend Noel Coward, and even sends a telegram on behalf of the filmmakers.
Ian wired Noel Coward and asked him if he would play Dr. No. And a telegram came back saying, no, no, no.
The producers come up with an exceptional second choice. Noted New York actor Joseph Wiseman. The part requires the actor to wear cumbersome metallic gloves and bothersome makeup applications to simulate an Asian heritage. Terence Young taps American Jack Lord to play CIA agent Felix Leiter.
Mine's a guy in Washington. Felix Leiter, Central Intelligence Agency.
Director Young turns to a longtime friend, Anthony Dawson, to play Professor Dent. John Kitzmiller, an accomplished American actor living in Europe, signs on to play Quarrel, the Jamaican boatman. Terence Young must also cast an ensemble of actors who are meant to become recurring characters, including Bond's chief, who is known only by the letter M. Bernard Lee proves the perfect match for the role. An unfortunate tragedy leads Lois Maxwell to become part of the James Bond family. Her husband suffers from a massive heart attack.
I called producers and directors with whom I had worked before, and Terence rang me and said, I want you to come to Cubby Broccoli's office because I want to talk to you about a couple of parts. And you can either have the part of Miss Moneypenny, the secretary, or the part of the glamour girl. And the glamour girl was first seen in Bond's pajama tops, and I didn't fancy myself in his pajama tops.
Actress Eunice Gayson has already acted in films for director Terence Young.
He said, I'm going to do this new series of James Bond, and I'd like to write you in a character called Sylvia.
Terence Young fills out the cast with an experienced actress, Zena Marshall, who, like Joseph Wiseman, must wear a makeup application to look Asian. One major part remains to be cast before the crew travels to Jamaica: the orphaned seashell collector, Honey Rider. Producer Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman find themselves 2 weeks away from shooting, but have yet to fill the role, until Harry Saltzman finds a photograph taken by actor John Derrick of his wife.
John took some photographs of me in Greece, and I had a black T-shirt on, and I was all wet.
The pair arranged to send the script to the unknown actress, offering her the role of Honey Rider without ever meeting her face to face.
One day, Cook Douglas came over, and we were all sitting around, and they said, well, they offered me this film. I said, well, let's read it. Let's see what it is, because I didn't read it yet. And then he began to read, and we were all, there on the floor laughing and having fun with it. And then Cook said, also, you have to do it. It's fun, it's easy, you have to do it.
During his location scouting trip to Jamaica, Terence Young finds other cast members.
I was working with BWIA at the ticket counter at the airport. And I remember a gentleman coming in front of my position, and he said, would you like to be in the movies? So I said, certainly, sir. May I have your ticket, please? He said, you don't understand. I am going to be making a series of movies which will become the most famous in the whole world.
Terence Young eventually convinces the flight attendant, who also happens to be the reigning Miss Jamaica, to come to an audition.
They had me reading for a part where I was supposed to be wrapped in a towel, lying on a bed, kissing a strange man. I said, I cannot lie in a towel on the bed kissing him. My parents would object. Well, they sort of looked at me as though, is this girl crazy? And then I read for the lesser part, which was the part of the photographer in the film.
Margaret Loise and her sister Barbara Loise were the two most beautiful girls in Jamaica, just stunning looking.
Timothy Moxon, a London stage actor turned Caribbean crop duster, is cast as MI6 agent Strangways after a chance encounter.
I just happened to be sitting in the Courtly Manor Hotel, and I knew Terence Young actually from way back before, you know, and I said, he said, yes, I've got a little part you can do in the beginning of the thing.
During the first week of January 1962, the crew of Dr. No flies to Jamaica. Filming begins on January the 16th, 1962, with scene 39. Bond walking past the photographer.
My first day of shooting was shattering. First of all, the entire body of my co-workers somehow managed to leave their positions to come and look at me, and I was very nervous. Terence Young gave me this camera to use, and this camera seemed to have a crank handle and levers and dials and bulbs, and he explained how to use it once. I think I had Sean walking up and down about 9 times before we got it right.
Just before noon, the crew has completed the first shot of Sean Connery as James Bond. For the very next setup, Terence Young adds a sexy yet villainous touch.
He said to me, I want you to lick the flashbulb. And I said, but that's yucky, that's evil. And he said, you are supposed to be evil.
The first week's shooting turns out to be something of a family affair for Margaret Loise. Her brother-in-law, Reggie Carter, noted as one of Jamaica's top actors, plays the chauffeur, Mr. Jones.
Reggie Carter was one of the main actors in something called the Little Theatre in Jamaica.
He was a fine actor.
On January the 18th, Bob Simmons choreographs the first of over 100 action scenes he will stage for the Bond films. His hard-hitting, high-impact style stamps the series from the very beginning. By January the 24th, the crew shoots a sequence where music plays a key role. Preparation begins months earlier with the hiring of Monty Norman, one of the hottest composers in the London theatre scene.
They told me that they were going to do Dr. No. I was intrigued. So I said, let me have a think about it. But then Harry Saltzman gave me the clincher. He said, we're doing 12 weeks or so in Jamaica. And if you like, you can come out, do some of the work there, and bring your wife. So I said, I'll do it.
Composer Monty Norman works with Byron Lee and the Dragoneers to create the first hit song for a James Bond film.
When we went to one or two of the big clubs there, these wonderful open-air clubs where everybody was going wild, dancing, they were doing this thing called the Jump Up.
Byron Lee and the Dragonaires, this was a very famous band in Jamaica.
Terence Young wanted some melody to give to the Byron Lee Orchestra so that they could play it live and wild while the dance was going on. It became quite a hit in Jamaica.
Byron Lee, at the time that Dr. No was being filmed, was the biggest band in Jamaica. And today, in 1999, Byron Lee is the biggest band in Jamaica. It's unbelievable.
The star musicians draw big crowds. Meanwhile, the actors have serious work.
Evening, missus.
You're hurting. I kept on messing up my lines. Terence Young got up and he threw his gear cap on and he said, we're going to take a coffee break. And he walked off the set. And Sean looked at me and he said to me in his lovely Scots accent, he said, Marguerite, where is your self-confidence? And I said, I don't have any. And I started to cry. And I said, I want to go home, I'm not an actress. He said, let me tell you about self-confidence. If you physically look the part, you are efficient, you project that personality, self-confidence will happen.
On January the 26th, Connery films Bond's arrival at King's House. Terence Young encourages Connery to toss off the scripted line with casual indifference.
Sergeant, make sure he doesn't get away.
Connery and Young like the dry, dark humor of the line and begin working more of it into the script.
How did it happen?
I think they were on their way to a funeral.
That kind of one-line humour that we really initiated in there is all over.
Actor Timothy Moxon finds his part calls less for acting lessons and more for a first aid kit.
After I got shot in the thing, the three blind men, including the one with the red hat on who was my dentist, threw me into the hearse, and I'm 5'9½", and they only threw 5'9" into the hearse and slammed the door, which is, you know, made rather a live corpse.
Another local actress, Dolores Quito, gets her chance to be in the film when she offers the production her house as a location. In late January, Ursula Andress flies to Jamaica despite anxieties about taking the role.
I met Terence Young, and then he said, "Why don't you come 7 o'clock to the dining room?" And I walked in, and there was no one was in the dining room except Sean. And I walked in, so he got up and said, "Hello, I'm Sean Connery." And I said, "I'm Ursula," and that's the way I met him in the dining room.
They filmed the last scene first. That was the first thing they filmed, which was him in the boat right at the end.
There is immediate on-screen chemistry between the pair, and off-screen a strong friendship develops.
Sean is a marvelous person. The day I met him, till today, which I still see him, we're still good friends. He stayed exactly the same person I met in 1962. Down to earth, simple and real. He's a fabulous person and a marvelous actor.
On Tuesday, February the 6th, the crew moves to the exotic north shore of Jamaica, where Ian Fleming and Noel Coward are among a few of the famous homeowners. By February the 8th, director Terence Young is filming a scene which will go down in cinema history.
When we did the opening scene in Laughing Mud in Ocho Rio, it was a private property.
That was owned by a woman called Minnie Simpson at the time.
And it's very, very lovely with these waterfalls coming down. It was beautiful.
The most beautiful river running into this beach. It was just really the most beautiful spot. That's the spot where Ursula Andress came out of the water.
Of course, the natural setting is not the only attraction.
Honey Rider, I was supposed to be a native girl, and I was supposed to be very tan. I just came Snow White there, so my first impression, I had to get makeup from here to the toe. John O'Gorman was a makeup man, a lovely man. So I said, "Okay, take the clothes off." So I had to stand there all naked in the room. So they began with this pancake, going from top to bottom. Then every other second, somebody was knocking on the door. And John O'Gorman, "Come in." I said, "Here I'm all nude. Here they come with the breakfast."
Looking for shells?
No, I'm just looking.
Finally, when we were finished with my body, I think we had 20 trays of breakfast because I think everybody wanted to come in to watch me being there naked, being painted from top to bottom.
The schedule calls for other shots before Ursula Andress gets to make her famous entrance.
Sean and I had to run as fast as we can, and I slipped on this coral reef and opened the whole leg. And you know, coral, it takes so long to heal because it's like has this poison. And I tore my leg, I slapped some more makeup over this whole bloody leg.
Despite a badly scraped leg and a swollen knee, Ursula Andress becomes the epitome of beauty for a generation of moviegoers. Her allure is so powerful that even James Bond's creator is smitten.
I remember the first time Ian Fleming came to the set and we had all lunch. He was a fascinating man. He had, the way he writes also, because he's so full of information, so full of knowledge, he was a lovely man.
Fleming is so struck with Ursula Andress that he mentions her name in his next James Bond novel, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. On February the 12th, the crew moves to the northwest corner of Jamaica to the Vansy Swamp in Falmouth. There, Ursula Andress is joined by her husband, John Derrick.
He was a very glamorous guy at the time. I remember him with a camera taking lots of pictures of Ursula.
He liked to create. He's a creator. He's a very fascinating human being. He's my only husband, my best friend, and stayed my best friend till he died.
The location proves to be the most challenging of the Jamaican shoot, requiring the creation of Dr. No's dragon.
Harry and Cubby wanted me to design something rather terrifying.
We used a tractor initially.
I said, "Well, where am I going to find a green tractor?" They said, "I don't care where you find it, just find it and get it there at 9 o'clock.
Outfitted with a flamethrower, the tractor becomes Dr. No's dragon. But the work is not complete. Preparations must be taken to keep the machine from sinking into the swamp mud.
I didn't know how deep it was, and so I thought, well, the only way to find it is to wade in there. Oh, it's awful. I sort of sunk right down in the mud. And when we came out, we were bitten, like, all over by mosquitoes, and I was covered in leeches, which I had to get rid of one by one with a cigarette. I had to burn them off.
Oh, the swamps were awful. They were awful, they were smelly.
It was just ugly and swampy and nasty, but Terence was well set up. He insisted on being very, very comfortable.
When the crew moves to the White River, they are joined by former model and glamour photographer Bunny Yeager.
Samuel J. Friedman, who was in charge of the national publicity for United Artists, he asked me if I would like to go to Jamaica and photograph this new starlet by the name of Ursula Andress.
The combination of Ursula Andress and the photographer who made Betty Page famous creates indelible images.
I was excited when I met Ursula because then I met her husband, John Derrick. And of course, we all knew who John Derrick was, and I had to shoot when they were resetting the cameras or a cloud came over, and I just took her to the side of the set and I started using the backgrounds that were right there. I think she's one of the best. She was very natural. She had a sizzling quality, a true star quality about herself.
The crew moves to the Reynolds Bauxite Docks in Ocho Rios, filming on a Sunday to keep to the tight schedule. With only 3 days left to shoot, Terence Young works quickly.
Thank God I was athletic, you know, because I could run.
A lot of black smoke and a lot of real fire. It looked very real and very big and scary.
We were running through this factory down and up and down and then jumping into the boat at the end. My goodness, it was an experience.
I got an extra £5 or something to be one of the people that jumped off the dock.
After the last few scenes have been shot, the Bond team prepares to leave Jamaica. On Friday, February the 23rd, Cubby Broccoli, Harry Saltzman, and Terence Young return to Pinewood Studios, where Ken Adam has been left alone to design and build the sets while the crew was in Jamaica.
I had nobody looking over my shoulders. They were faced with 3 or 4 stages filled with sets. And I was a little nervous. Fortunately, Terence was the first one to arrive on the stage, and he really flipped. I mean, he was delighted with what he saw.
Ken Adams' sets create a whole new style of cool, austere elegance. Filming at Pinewood begins on Monday, February the 26th, with Bernard Lee as M, Peter Burton as Boothroyd, and Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. On March the 2nd, Terence Young directs Sean Connery's introduction to audiences as James Bond. Terence Young decides to lift an idea from director William Dietley's film Juarez, in which Paul Muni is introduced through a series of close-ups before his face is revealed. By 10 a.m., Connery is dressed in his Turnbull and Asser shirt with bow tie. He has slipped comfortably into his dinner jacket from Anthony Sinclair. Cameras are set to roll on what will later be deemed the most memorable line of dialogue in the history of movies.
I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Convinced that much of Bond's appeal is based on his sexual magnetism, filmmakers create a character not found in Fleming's novel, Miss Darrow.
Forgive me. I thought I was invited up here to admire the view.
The scene ends with a controversial confrontation between Bond and Professor Dent.
Drop it, Professor. I'm behind you.
The question is whether James Bond should kill an unarmed man in cold blood. Eventually, Young and the producers choose to film the riskiest version. Bond remorselessly shoots Dent. With this choice, the cinematic character of James Bond becomes complete, ruthlessly handsome, mixed with a dark, dry wit, coated with a veneer of sophistication. With the death of Professor Dent, Bond earns his 00 number, his license to kill. A key element remains: the James Bond villain. Dr. No's first scene poses a challenge for designer Ken Adam.
I wanted to come up with an impressive set, theatrical. So I came up with this circular opening with a grid, a bare set with just one chair.
As the screen opened up at Rush's and this dome appeared, the whole crew applauded. It was an instantaneous reaction to a brilliant piece of interpretation. No one else in the world would have thought of a dome.
The set itself helps establish Dr. No as a larger-than-life villain, but it is only the first design challenge for Ken Adam. He comes up with a design philosophy for Dr. No's massive underground apartment.
You can only call it tongue-in-the-cheek, slightly ahead of its time type of concept. To juxtapose the modern space with good antiques.
I fall in love with everything. I wanted to take everything home with me. I said, oh, look at the fabulous desk. And, oh, I thought it. And the aquarium he made and everything he did, it was fabulous.
Everybody started saying, well, you know, we've got to find something even more exotic in here.
It is writer Joanna Harwood who comes up with the perfect touch.
The famous Goya portrait had just been stolen and nobody could find it.
Joanna Harwood, one of the writers, decided, wouldn't it be funny if he had stolen the Goya painting of the Duke of Wellington?
The key to the film remains Dr. No's threatening presence. Joseph Wiseman plays the role with unnerving calmness on the surface.
I remember he was so nervous. So I said, oh, thank God I find somebody else who is nervous.
Despite nerves, Wiseman's performance sets the standard for all Bond villains to follow.
Unfortunately, I misjudged you. You are just a stupid policeman.
Tell me, does the toppling of American missiles really compensate for having no hands?
For the film's finale, Adam creates a massive $100,000 set, Dr. No's nuclear reactor control room.
The most important part of that whole complex was really the nuclear reactor room. It was a big set. And it had to be very functional in many ways because there's a fight in the end.
A lot of talent went into the Bond films. Ken Adams' contribution is beyond description.
One of the final scenes proves to be one of the most challenging.
There was a scene where Dr. No was going to experiment on me, the pain, how much pain I can sustain. And he was going to put me in a pool of these big king crabs. And they had to fly those into London. These crabs finally came in, they opened all the cases, but they were all frozen because they were packed on ice.
And they didn't look menacing and they were half dead and, oh no, it was a disaster.
Quickly, the crabs are removed and Ken Adam arranges for a flooding effect.
Everybody said, okay, that's a wrap, bye. Bye-bye, and that's it. Nobody thought ever it's going to be this successful.
The raw elements of the film are turned over to editor Peter Hunt.
You know, the standard thing was, you mustn't cut on movement because it'll be a jump, you know, that sort of thing. Well, that's nonsense.
Hunt's innovative style of cutting creates a breathtaking sense of movement.
I didn't wait for movement to stop me from cutting from one thing to the other and keeping the timing of the sequences going.
One vital element is creating a sound for the film, starting with the voice of Ursula Andress.
I bet I know a lot more things than you do.
I think she had rather an attractive voice, but it was a voice with a heavy accent.
Peter Hunt hires voice artist Monica Vandersil to redub Ursula Andress, giving her voice a mild accent and a sense of sexually charged innocence.
Do you have a woman of your own?
Monica Vandersil was an extremely good voice.
But the voices are only one part of the final soundtrack.
We had to have an overall sound.
The job of creating the sounds on Dr. No falls largely to Norman Wanstall.
In those early days, we didn't have the facilities of synthesizers and computers, and it really was very difficult to create noises. You had to go out and seek and find anyone that had a tone or a hum or a whir or any machine that would create anything.
He was very good and very inventive.
I was searching in the libraries and I found the most extraordinary electronic track. I don't know where it was produced from. And immediately my mind said, Dr. No, Bond in the Tunnel. Gordon McCullum, who was the man who actually mixed the tracks together, I found it very interesting. He was a very volatile man and people were slightly in awe of his temper. When he saw the rough cut of Dr. No, he left his empire, which it was, at Pinewood Studios, walked over to my editing room and he knocked on the door and very humbly said, when can we start? He said, this is what filmmaking's all about.
I still wasn't really happy with a Bond theme. And I had a meeting with Cubby and Harry at one time. And I think it was Harry who suggested possibly putting Underneath the Mango Tree at the top of the film. And I thought, no, that can't be so.
I mean, it was inappropriate music for the film.
And I suddenly remembered something that I'd written for a musical called A House for Mr. Biswas. I was born with this unlucky sneeze, and what is worse, I came into the world the wrong way round. The next middle section went, I was born under a bad sign. This was the genesis of the James Bond theme.
The theme is not yet complete, and time is running out. John Barry is brought in to arrange and conduct the new theme.
He brought some marvelous dynamics and chords and ideas.
We just recorded a DMI with lots of reverb, lots of echo with the big band, and it just sounded very fresh.
I was very fortunate in the end in getting this marvelous James Bond theme.
When I heard it, I was knocked out.
So it went practically into every time James Bond was about to do something or something was about to happen, I inserted the music.
The film nears completion, but graphic designer Maurice Binder has an idea for the opening shot.
That was Maurice's idea. It was a pure invention of Maurice.
Using a pinhole camera, Maurice Binder and Trevor Bond photographed the inside of a pistol barrel. Using stuntman Bob Simmons to double for Bond, Maurice Binder creates an opening logo which excites generations of Bond fans the world over. On October the 6th, 1962, Dr. No premieres at the London Pavilion Cinema in Piccadilly Circus. In the United Kingdom, the film becomes an immediate smash. In the United States, Bond becomes a hit in the spring of 1963. Soon, 007 fills theaters around the globe. In its initial release, the film earns more than 20 times its $1 million budget. Dr. No stands as a testament of the collaborative art of filmmaking. The film captivates audiences, intrigues critics, inspires filmmakers. It took one man to write the James Bond novels, but it takes over 100 film professionals to transform Ian Fleming's literary secret agent into the legendary hero of the silver screen.